this caught Mar-a-Lago and caught Trump advisors very much by surprise. They had been believing the idea that the grand jury was out for a month, which was widely reported. It was not entirely clear whether that was going to be the case, and as it turns out, it was not, based on our reporting. They are in something of shock. I think they will move past that fairly quickly. I think you will, see Trump get very aggressive about Bragg. We don't know exactly what the charges are yet, so that adds an element of uncertainty to it. But this is not a moment Donald Trump wanted. It's a moment that he's been avoiding for many, many, many decades, is being indicted criminally. It may help him politically, Wolf. There are reasons to believe this case in particular could, with his base, but nobody wants an indictment, and Donald Trump is not an exception. And now this sets in motion a series of actions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Maggie. No one wants to be criminally charged with an indictment, and now the former president of the United States is about to be criminally charged with an indictment. Norm Eisen, you're our legal analyst. Walk us through what Trump should now expect.
Well, Wolf, Trump will now need to will receive the indictment, and he will need to decide if he is going to show up and plead, as almost every defendant does, or if he's going to fight it. You've heard the reporting that he will show up. But Wolf, what he should expect is the treatment that any defendant gets when they're accused of a serious crime. And all indications here are that this is no mere salacious hush money account. This is allegations of keeping false books and records in order to conceal campaign finance contributions. These payments were done, in part at least, to aid the campaign. If that is how it develops, that's a felony in New York, Wolf, and it's a serious matter given the closeness of that 2016 election, a serious democracy matter. So he should expect to be treated accordingly.
He'll be treated like any American citizen if he's formally criminally charged with an indictment. Maggie Haberman, let me get your thoughts. I know you got to run soon, but tell me what else Trump will be doing as we anticipate these charges will be presented to him very, very soon.
Sure. Well, if they're still digesting the news down at Mar-a-Lago, they really were caught very much by surprise by the fact of this happening. I can't stress that enough. Now will come the delicate arrangements around a surrender, which, Trump's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, said he is going to do willingly. We have heard that from other people around him as well. With Trump, you obviously never know. Surrender in any form is not something Donald Trump likes to do, I think, let alone this one. But that is where we are going to go with this next. And that will, I suspect, happen in the coming days. And I think Trump will, try to use the weekend to sway public opinion as much as possible. That's his go-to move, Wolf. It has always been his go-to move, is to try to shape public opinion and use that to force events. He was trying it with what was essentially an intimidation campaign against Alvin Bragg in the last 2 weeks. It clearly did not work.
Certainly did not work. This indictment about to be formally presented to the former president of the United States. And you're in New York, Maggie. I take it security has been beefed up dramatically over these past several days?
Well, security had been beefed up, and then it seemed as if it had receded a bit. There were some reports a little bit earlier today that there might have been some increase happening. I certainly expect, if it has not happened already, it will in the coming days, because nobody knows how this is going to play out. I will note that, Trump previously called on his supporters to protest. Take our nation back was the quote that he put on Truth Social. Very few people showed up to protest because very few people, wanted to do anything to jeopardize themselves, especially after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. That could change with the actuality of an indictment. That's what a lot of this has depended on, because Trump's supporters have heard so many times for the last, 6 years that he was in trouble and then he wasn't. I think that this just didn't feel like a reality, and we'll see if now it does.
You've covered Trump for years, and Maggie, you know him well. How much does this bruise his ego, especially unfolding in his backyard of Manhattan?
I think two things, Wolf. I think there's no question that, for somebody who made his bones in this city, his image, was built brick by brick of news stories in this city. He considered Robert Morgenthau, one of Alvin Bragg's predecessors, a personal friend. He was very clear about that with me in an interview that I did with him for a book I wrote about him. I think this has a very significant effect. I also think that, he was very, very He was horrified, for lack of a better word, watching Alan Weisselberg, his former chief financial officer at the Trump Organization, taken away by officers when he surrendered, when he was indicted in 2021. And Alan Weisselberg is about Trump's age, I think a little bit younger. Trump is not looking forward to this. I think there is a real world effect here, and then there is the internal effect.
Yeah. Wolf, can I just add to that? That moment with Alan Weisselberg is something that Trump has brought up repeatedly in private, noting the fact that it was someone that he had known and worked with for such a long time, was part of his organization for such a long time. They had this storied history together. And to watch what happened to him, I think really shook Trump. I mean, he often brought it up, still brings it up to this day, not just publicly on Truth Social, but at dinners, at private dinners with friends and private conversations, to often talking about his own investigation. So it is a moment that actually shook him. And I do think that is something that he has been considering and thinking about in recent weeks, as this has become a very real reality for him, that this is also something that could likely tap into him, that this arrest, this indictment is something that was in his future. And they were bracing for it last week. They kind of had been under this impression down at Mar-a-Lago that it could happen any moment. They were making the preparations for what that would look like. It seemed to hit a lull. And Trump has this idea sometimes that if he goes and speaks, or if he speaks publicly about something, that he can bend things toward his will. I think you saw that at his rally in Waco, Texas, as he spent a large chunk of time talking about these investigations and talking about how he believes he's been treated unfairly. He even briefly entertained the idea of going before the grand jury, something that no attorney would recommend for their client, because he does have this idea that he can shape people's opinions and change their views on things. Obviously, that has not happened here. And there are big questions about what this case actually looks like going forward. It's not a slam dunk, as you've heard from many legal experts. But the idea that this is actually happening, I think, is something that they had tried to push off for as long as possible.
Yeah, they tried and tried and tried, but they clearly now have failed. This criminal indictment is about to be presented to Trump, and the legal process will move forward. Very, very serious developments as well. Shan Wu, you're a former prosecutor. Walk us through what Trump should now expect.
Well, he'll have to expect that his lawyers are going to have to arrange for him to do a self-surrender. And this question of whether he does a big publicity stunt with a perp walk, that's something that they'll have to work out a little bit. I don't think that's going to be completely in his control. It's going to be between the DAs, Secret Service, New York Police Department. I just want to say, what Caitlin was pointing out about him being so affected by Weisselberg, I just find it interesting he didn't seem to be so moved or pained by Michael Cohen actually going to jail for this very crime. And it's Cohen now that's going to be a central witness against him, and he's going to have to be faced with the question of how does he prepare for this reality with his legal team. I mean, will they even consider a guilty plea if something is offered? We don't really know how much leverage the DA has on him. He's going to learn that when they get a copy of the indictment. The movement we've been hearing about the possible second charge with McDougal, even what we've heard about possible pressure on Weisselberg, we don't know if that's already been charged, and even if it hasn't, of course, there's still the possibility of a superseding indictment. So now that this first step has been taken, it's a lot of pressure that's just going to keep on rolling down towards him.
And indeed, Shan, it's just the first step, criminal indictment of Trump, but the charges, we don't specifically know. We haven't been briefed on that yet, but I assume we will be getting that information fairly soon. But then the prosecutors of Manhattan, the district attorney, Shan, they have to prove the case. And by all accounts, that's not necessarily going to be all that simple, is it?
Well, I think the factual part of proving it is relatively simple. I mean, they've got the documents to show it. They've got Michael Cohen to corroborate that and explain how it happened. They have Pecker possibly, and they also may have Stormy Daniels. I think what you're alluding to, Wolf, is the question of how persuasive can all that be? And so when you have somebody like a Michael Cohen who has some baggage, he has a conviction, always they are attacked. He's been quite consistent, although rather verbose, he's been quite consistent. There's also an inherent bias towards someone like Stormy Daniels. I mean, she's female, she's in the adult film industry, and so prosecutors will be worried about overcoming that bias too. But it's not a factually difficult case to put forth, but there are some credibility humps they have to get over. And I would also expect that Trump's team will try to come up with just an avalanche of trial type motions, trying to knock down some of the legal theories from a legal standpoint once we know what they are.
I assume, Shan, correct me if I'm wrong, the district attorney and the other prosecutors in Manhattan right now, they must believe they have a slam dunk case, because you don't formally criminally charge a former president of the United States unless you're 100% convinced you've got the evidence to win.
Absolutely. I think they are 100% convinced that they can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm sure they wouldn't agree it's a slam dunk case. Nothing ever is when you have to go before a jury, but I'm quite positive that they think they have a very strong case in terms of evidence.